welcome to the deep dive. You've shared a really interesting collection of articles and notes about snoring. It's something so many of us deal with, right? Either personally or, sleeping next to someone who does.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to try and cut through all the noise, so to speak.
Yeah.
And get to the heart of what's really going on.
Exactly. When we looked at what you sent, it became pretty clear that snoring is much more than just a nighttime annoyance.
Right.
Our goal in this deep dive, really, is to move past the frustration it causes, understand why it happens, maybe uncover some potential dangers people aren't aware of, and then explore the surprisingly wide range of solutions out there, both surgical and non-surgical ones.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Something that really stood out to me was this idea that snoring isn't just sound.
Yeah.
It's actually a signal, like a symptom that could point to some potentially serious issues with how we're breathing when we're asleep.
That's a key point. Absolutely. Get that right from the start. And it's so widespread, isn't it?
Totally.
Think about how many people you know who snore or, who complain about being kept awake by someone else's snoring.
Oh, yeah.
It's a shared experience, often a shared struggle for just a decent night's rest.
Definitely.
And that's why finding real solutions is, pretty important for a lot of folks.
Right. And I think many of us, maybe we just see snoring as kind of funny or just like a bad habit someone has.
Sure, the butt of jokes sometimes.
Yeah. But what your sources really emphasize is that we need to take a closer look, understand what it could actually be telling us.
Precisely. So let's break down what's physically happening when someone snores.
Okay.
Essentially, it's a sound, a resonant sound during sleep, and it's caused by vibrations.
Vibrations where?
In a narrowed airway, specifically kind of where your mouth and nasal passages meet, back there.
Oh, okay.
When that area gets constricted, the act of breathing forces air through, and that creates the vibration. Think of it like trying to blow through a straw that's partially squeezed shut.
Right, it makes that fluttering noise.
Exactly. It vibrates and makes noise.
Okay, so why does this squeezing shut seem to happen mostly when we're asleep?
Good question. It's because when we fall asleep, our whole body relaxes, right? And that includes all the muscles and the soft tissues in our throat and airway.
Okay.
Plus, when we're lying down, gravity plays a part too.
Okay.
So these relaxed tissues can sort of sag and partially block the breathing passage.
Right.
So to compensate, we instinctively breathe more forcefully, and that stronger airflow makes those relaxed tissues vibrate even more intensely. That's the snore.
So does that mean the louder the snore, the more blocked the airway is?
Yeah.
And the harder the body's working to get air?
That's generally it. Yeah, loud snoring is basically an audible sign that the body is struggling to get enough oxygen.
Wow.
The more constricted the airway, the more forceful the breath needs to be, and boom, the louder the vibration. It's a pretty direct correlation.
Now, one of the things that came up in the sources was about men and women. It said men tend to snore more. Why is that?
Generally, that holds true, yeah. Men often do snore more frequently, and sometimes louder.
Huh.
One of the main reasons seems to be physiological. Men tend to have, on average, thicker necks,
Okay.
which usually means there's just more tissue around the breathing passages, increasing the potential for obstruction.
Makes sense.
And interestingly, women seem to have a bit of natural protection thanks to the hormone progesterone. It appears to have some sort of protective effect.
Really?
Yeah. But, and this is really important, it doesn't mean women don't snore. Women absolutely can and do snore, sometimes quite loudly too.
Okay, good to clarify. So we get the mechanics now, but what are the specific things that can actually cause snoring or, make it worse? Your sources had a pretty long list.
They did, yeah. And it really shows that snoring isn't just one single thing. We can maybe group these factors to make it a bit clearer.
Okay.
First, you've got things like allergies. Obvious one.
Sure, being stuffed up.
Yeah. And even some allergy medications, ironically, can play a role. Some can dry out your sinus passages, which can actually contribute.
Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Then you have temporary things like colds and the flu, just general congestion.
Right.
Even something like scarring in the nasal passage, maybe from a previous surgery, that can be a factor. Or just a general thickness of the tissues in your sinuses.
Okay.
And surprisingly, overusing nasal sprays can actually backfire.
Yeah.
It can irritate the sinuses and worsen things in the long run.
Wow, okay. Nasal spray overuse? What else?
Well, certain medications, even prescribed ones, might have side effects that lead to snoring, like drying out sinuses or maybe relaxing throat muscles too much.
Huh.
Physically, things like Enlarged tonsils or adenoids are common culprits, especially in kids.
Right.
A goiter that's a swollen thyroid gland, or even just having an unusually large tongue, can physically block the airway.
Makes sense.
Obesity is a really big one. That extra tissue in the neck and other soft tissues is a major contributor. Even carrying extra weight around the stomach can affect breathing mechanics.
Right. Okay.
Lifestyle choices, too. Drinking alcohol, especially near bedtime, is well known for relaxing throat muscles. Smoking irritates the airways, and then just aging. As we get older, our tissues naturally lose some elasticity, which can make snoring more likely.
So it sounds like the key takeaway is that snoring is, well, it's complicated.
Right.
Lots of potential triggers.
Exactly. From temporary allergies to chronic conditions to lifestyle stuff, it's complex.
Which really underlines that point you made earlier. It's not just a simple problem with one cause.
Absolutely. And this is why that common perception, of snoring being just a minor annoyance can be so problematic.
Right.
Your sources use the term subversive.
Subversive, right. Because it seems harmless on the surface. But it's definitely more than just annoying, isn't it? It's a sign the body might not be getting enough oxygen during sleep.
That's the crux of it. Snoring is basically an indication of potential oxygen deprivation. The body's having to work harder to breathe.
Okay.
And over time, this struggle, this lack of sufficient oxygen, can be a precursor to some really serious health issues.
Okay, let's talk about those health issues then.
Yeah.
Your sources gave a pretty sobering list of physical problems linked to snoring.
Yes. It's important to understand the potential physical toll. The list included things like sleep apnea, which is a major concern we definitely need to dig into.
Right.
But also heart disease, stroke, frequent headaches, night sweats, even heartburn.
Heartburn, really?
Yeah, the mechanics of breathing can affect that. Also, swelling in the limbs, a weakened immune system, and surprisingly, even hearing loss.
Hearing loss, wow.
Yeah, and as your source noted, this isn't even a complete list, and these things can affect people of all ages.
And the big one you mentioned there is sleep apnea. One source called it a silent killer. That sounds pretty serious.
It is indeed very serious. Sleep apnea is basically characterized by involuntary pauses, actual stops in breathing during sleep.
Okay.
And the link to snoring is incredibly strong. Loud snoring is often the body's desperate attempt to breathe through that partially blocked airway.
Right.
Sleep apnea happens when that blockage becomes so severe that breathing just stops completely. For moments, sometimes longer, repeatedly through the night.
So what happens then? What are the consequences when someone keeps stopping breathing like that?
Well, when breathing stops, the body is deprived of oxygen. Simple as that. This creates an imbalance in the bloodstream. Oxygen levels drop, carbon dioxide levels rise.
Okay.
Over time, this chronic lack of oxygen and the buildup of CO2 can have really severe consequences. We're talking potential contributions to brain damage, heart disease, stroke.
Jeez.
That's why persistent, loud snoring really shouldn't be ignored. It's a clear sign something isn't right with your breathing during sleep.
It's definitely not just physical health, though, is it? Your sources also went into the emotional side of things.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds like snoring can put a massive strain on relationships and just mental well-being in general.
Huge strain. And it's crucial to remember it's often not just the person snoring who suffers.
Right, the partner.
Exactly. Loud, consistent snoring can severely disrupt the sleep of partners, family members, roommates, sometimes even neighbors in thin-walled apartments.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Imagine trying to get restful sleep next to someone who's snoring, as one source vividly put it, sounds like a truck idling in the room.
Ugh.
This constant sleep deprivation leads to immense frustration, and over time it can really wear down empathy and compassion.
I can only imagine the toll that takes. What kind of emotional disturbances did the sources mention for the people around the snorer?
The list was pretty significant. Loss of sleep itself is a major trigger for depression and anxiety.
Makes sense.
It can absolutely lead to the breakdown of relationships, including marriages ending over it.
Wow.
In extreme cases, people have been evicted because their snoring disturbs other tenants.
Oh.
Yeah. Conflicts with partners or neighbors are common. Poor work performance because you're constantly exhausted. That can even lead to losing your job. Memory problems crop up. And like we said, that initial patience just evaporates.
And what about the person who's actually doing the snoring? What are they feeling? Even if they're not fully aware of the noise they're making?
That's a good point. Even if they don't realize the noise, the underlying lack of good restorative sleep takes its toll. They often feel chronic exhaustion during the day.
Right.
They might feel frustrated by being tired all the time, maybe even resentful if they feel blame for something they can't seem to control, or angry at the whole situation.
Yeah.
There can be a real sense of helplessness, anguish over the lack of sleep for themselves and their partner, desperation to find a solution, low self-esteem, feeling like a burden, even just confusion about why they're always tired. So yes, snoring can really hammer the emotional well-being of everyone involved.
It really paints a picture of a problem that goes way, way beyond just a nighttime annoyance. Okay, so let's pivot. What can actually be done about it?
Right, solutions.
Your sources talked about surgery and non-surgical options, but it sounded like they strongly advised against jumping straight to surgery.
That's correct. That came through loud and clear. While surgery might seem like a direct fix, understanding the root cause of the snoring is absolutely crucial before you even think about it.
Okay.
Your sources basically make a compelling case against rushing into surgery for snoring. It's often invasive, carries significant risks, and there's no guarantee of success, especially if the underlying cause isn't precisely what the surgery addresses.
So what are the main arguments against it as a first step?
Several key things. Firstly, surgery for snoring is often kind of exploratory.
Exploratory, how so?
Well, because the reasons for snoring vary so much person to person, the surgeon doesn't always know exactly what they'll find or if removing certain tissue will actually fix that person's specific problem.
Ah.
Surgery always has risks, like infection and scarring. And surprisingly, sometimes surgery itself, like maybe a nose job, rhinoplasty, can actually cause or worsen snoring later due to changes in the structure or scar tissue.
That seems totally counterintuitive.
It does, right. The sources also point out that the success rates for snoring surgery aren't nearly as predictable as for many other common operations. The usual goal is to remove excess tissue that might be blocking the airway. But, like we've discussed, a physical blockage isn't always the whole story or even the main issue.
Right.
They use that car insurance analogy, which I thought was quite good.
Oh yeah, the bad drivers getting $500. How did that fit in?
Exactly. Giving all quote-unquote bad drivers $500 to offset their higher insurance premiums doesn't actually fix why they're bad drivers. Right?
No, it doesn't address the root cause.
Precisely. And similarly, surgery that just removes some tissue might be a superficial fix for the snoring sound. It doesn't necessarily address the real underlying causes. Maybe it's diet, maybe sleep position, maybe allergies, or maybe it's actually undiagnosed sleep apnea.
So the snoring might just come back.
Right.
Or worse, you've hidden a more serious problem.
Exactly. The surgery could mask something like sleep apnea, making it harder to diagnose later.
Okay, so besides potentially not working, are there specific risks with the surgery itself that people need to know about?
Oh, yes. The sources listed quite a few potential downsides. Things like undesirable cosmetic effects post-op, risk of infection, obviously.
Right.
Formation of scar tissue and inflammation, which could potentially even worsen breathing down the line. The possibility of needing expensive follow-up surgeries because the effect wears off or tissue regrows.
Wow.
A potentially long and uncomfortable healing process, needing pricey pain medication. And then more specific risks like potential damage to your speech or the tone of your voice.
Oh, wow.
Difficulties with swallowing, potential bleeding or seepage issues, really irritating chronic dry mouth sensation, and even referred pain like ear pain. It's quite a list.
It certainly is. And they also ran through some of the common surgical procedures and the problems reported with them. Maybe touch on a few.
Sure. Tracheostomy, that's creating an opening directly into the windpipe, the trachea.
Sounds extreme.
It is, usually reserved for very severe cases. Risks include irritation around the opening, scarring, maybe needing more surgery later, and the potential for like nasal secretions to actually block the artificial airway.
Okay. What about UPPP? That acronym came up.
Right, uvulopalatalopharyngoplasty. Catchy name.
Oh, yeah.
That aims to widen the airway by surgically removing or altering tissue in the throat, often including the uvula and parts of the soft palate. But it's expensive. It might need repeat surgeries if the obstruction comes back. Risk of infection, potential speech problems, a higher than average risk of bleeding, swallowing difficulties. And importantly, it's often not effective for treating the underlying sleep apnea, even if it reduces the snoring sound.
Gotcha. And the laser one, LAUP.
LAUP, yeah. Laser-assisted uvuloplasty uses lasers to remove the uvula and other tissues.
Sounds high-tech.
It is, but reported problems include chronic dry mouth, voice changes, which is a big deal for singers or
Yeah.
speakers,
Yeah.
ear pain, a really unpredictable success rate, and again, that risk of just masking deeper issues like apnea.
Okay. And Capiso.
Cautery. Cautery-assisted palatal stiffening operation, basically using heat to burn and stiffen the soft palate.
Ouch.
Yeah, reports mention significant post-op discomfort and pain. It's still considered somewhat experimental, maybe unproven long-term results, uncertain success, and it's costly. And the sources briefly mentioned even newer ones like somnoplasty and snoroplasty, basically saying that long-term effectiveness is also still kind of up in the air.
So the message seems crystal clear. Surgery for snoring is definitely not a magic bullet.
Yeah,
Lots of potential downsides, no guarantees.
pretty much sums it up.
Which leads us, thankfully, to the non-surgical options. And your sources indicated there are actually lots of these.
Yes, thankfully, there are many, many less invasive approaches to explore first.
Yep.
Your sources kind of group them into categories, which helps. You've got medicines, various devices and appliances you can use, lifestyle changes, diet and exercise, big ones there, changes to sleeping habits, and even some alternative therapies.
Okay.
The key thing, though, is that the effectiveness of any of these really depends on figuring out the specific cause or contributing factors for that individual snoring.
Right. Back to the root cause.
Exactly. It might even take trying a combination of things, a bit of trial and error, and seeing what actually provides relief.
Okay, let's start with medicines. What kind of medications could potentially help?
Well, there are both prescription and over-the-counter options. Some prescription drugs are designed to help open up the nasal airway or maybe energize breathing muscles.
Interesting.
Some even try to counteract deep REM sleep because that's when throat muscles are most relaxed. But as the source noted, messing with deep sleep isn't ideal either.
Yeah, there's a trade-off there.
Definitely. Over-the-counter options mostly focus on clearing nasal passages. So things like nasal decongestants, antihistamines if allergies are involved.
Okay.
And simple saline sprays are often recommended just to keep the sinuses moist, which can reduce that vibration.
Right. Less friction, maybe. Okay. What about devices? There seem to be a ton of different gadgets mentioned.
Oh yeah, there are loads, ranging from really simple to quite techy.
Like what?
Well, there's the Sandler pillow, which is basically just shaped to encourage you to sleep on your side.
Positional therapy.
Exactly. Then there's the snore ball, super low tech. You literally sew a tennis ball or something similar into the back of your pajamas.
Wait, really? A ball in your pajamas?
Yep. Makes sleeping on your back really uncomfortable, so you naturally roll onto your side.
Clever, I guess.
There are also electronic sleep position monitors, little devices that beep or vibrate gently if you roll onto your back, trying to train you to stay sideways.
Okay.
Then you have things that work on the nose. Simple adhesive nasal strips, you've probably seen those. They physically pull the nostrils open a bit. Nasal dilators are little coils or cones you actually insert into your nostrils to hold them open and ease breathing.
Right.
Throat sprays aim to lubricate the tissues at the back of the throat to reduce vibration, though the source is cautioned against overusing those as they can sometimes be irritating.
Gotcha.
And then there's the snore stopper device. It's supposed to detect snoring and then deliver a mild electric jolt, or maybe tense your tongue muscles to interrupt the pattern.
An electric jolt. Wow, okay, that's quite a range of external things. And then there were the appliances you actually wear inside your mouth.
Yes, these are designed to work more directly on the structures inside tongue, jaw, palate.
Okay, like what?
There are general oral appliances, sometimes called mandibular advancement devices, or MAAs. Examples mentioned were the equalizer or the silencer.
What do they do?
They basically look a bit like sports mouth guards. They're designed to keep your mouth closed, but more importantly, they gently position your lower jaw slightly forward.
Why forward?
Pulling the jaw forward also pulls the base of the tongue forward, preventing it from collapsing back and blocking the airway. It helps keep that passage open.
Okay. Makes sense.
Then there are specific tongue retaining appliances. These use suction, like a little bulb, to actively hold the tongue forward. Good for people whose snoring is mainly caused by their tongue falling back. The mandibular advancement appliances, the MAAs we mentioned, are often custom fitted by dentists. The Thornton adjustable positioner, or TAP device, is a well-known type, often adjustable, but usually more expensive.
Okay.
There were also palate lifters mentioned, sometimes called lip shields. They aim to somehow prevent the soft palate from vibrating, but the sources seemed a bit uncertain about how effective those really are.
Right.
And finally, very importantly, There's CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure.
That's the mask thing, right, for sleep apnea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
CPAP is the gold standard treatment for moderate to severe sleep apnea, not just simple snoring. It uses a mask connected to a machine that delivers pressurized air constantly, basically splinting the airway open all night.
Okay, so CPAP is really more for diagnosed apnea.
Correct. Though it definitely stops snoring, too, as a side effect of keeping the airway open.
Got it. That's a lot of internal options, too. Okay, let's shift to lifestyle. Diet and exercise came up as important.
Hugely important. Your diet can play a surprisingly big role.
How so?
Well, food allergies or sensitivities can cause inflammation and congestion, contributing to snoring. So identifying those is key.
Right.
Weight is a massive factor. Being overweight, especially with extra tissue around the neck, physically narrows the airway when you lie down. Losing even a bit of weight can make a huge difference for many people.
Right.
Also, certain foods might worsen congestion for some individuals. Dairy, fried foods, sugary junk food were mentioned as potential culprits, while focusing on things like leafy greens and generally healthier eating is often beneficial for breathing and overall health.
Makes sense.
And then there's the cleaner living aspect. Moderating alcohol, especially before bed. Quitting smoking, that's a big one if smoke irritates everything. And maybe cutting back on caffeine close to bedtime.
Okay. What about exercise?
General exercise is great for sleep quality and weight management, both of which help snoring.
Right.
But interestingly, there are also specific throat exercises you can do.
Throat exercises, like what?
Things like holding a pencil firmly between your teeth for a few minutes, or pressing your chin down against your fingers to create resistance, or pressing your tongue firmly against the roof of your mouth and holding it.
Huh. And that helps.
The idea is to strengthen the muscles in the tongue, palate, and throat, making them less likely to collapse and vibrate during sleep.
Fascinating. I never would have thought of exercising your throat for snoring. Okay, and then there are factors about sleep itself. Position, environment.
Absolutely. How you sleep matters. Sleeping flat on your back is usually the worst position for snoring.
Because gravity pulls everything back.
Exactly. It lets the tongue and soft tissues fall back and obstruct the airway much more easily. So, consciously trying to sleep on your side is often the first piece of advice.
Right, like with the pillow or the snorball.
Precisely. Using supportive pillows that keep your head aligned, or even special chin support straps or pillows designed to help keep your mouth closed can also help. And your sleep environment counts too. Using a humidifier, especially in dry climates or winter, keeps your throat and nasal passages moist, reducing irritation and vibration. And just basic sleep hygiene, making sure your room is dark, quiet, cool, promotes better, more relaxed breathing, and more restful sleep overall.
Okay. Lastly, let's touch on those alternative therapies.
Yeah.
Sources mentioned quite a few different approaches, some maybe more out there than others.
Yeah, there's definitely a broad spectrum there. Some are pretty common sense, others less conventional.
Like what?
Well, simple things like drinking warm, non-caffeinated herbal teas before bed can be soothing and help with relaxation.
Sure.
Practicing relaxation techniques, Tai Chi, yoga, meditation, getting a massage, listening to calming music. Anything that reduces overall stress and tension can potentially improve sleep quality and maybe reduce snoring.
Makes sense.
Then you get into things like homeopathic medicines specifically marketed for snoring, like Snore Stop or Wise Snore. Popular, but their scientific backing is often debated.
Right.
Magnetic therapy was mentioned, sometimes used in traditional Chinese medicine aiming to affect nerves in the nose. Some even link it to weight loss, which could indirectly help. Hypnosis has apparently been tried by some people, trying to gain subconscious control over it, but mainstream medicine is generally pretty skeptical about its effectiveness for snoring.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And then the sources briefly touched on even more alternative things using specific lights, colors, gemstones, crystals.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that while there's basically zero scientific evidence for a direct impact on snoring, the placebo effect is real. If someone believes it helps, they might perceive an improvement, or perhaps it just helps them relax.
Gotcha. So approach with healthy skepticism, maybe.
Exactly. The overall message seemed to be, if a particular therapy helps an individual reduce their snoring and isn't causing harm, maybe it's worth it for them. But definitely be wary of big claims lacking solid evidence.
It's really fascinating, though, just seeing the sheer breadth of potential solutions. It really highlights how multifaceted snoring can be.
It truly does. It underscores that point that, yeah, snoring is incredibly common, but it's absolutely not something to just brush off as a minor annoyance.
Right.
As we've talked about, the potential consequences like a physical health, emotional well-being can be really significant for the snorer and everyone around them.
So the big takeaway here seems to be, because there are so many potential causes, there's also this huge array of possible solutions. And given all those risks and uncertainties with surgery we discussed,
Yeah.
exploring those non-surgical options first seems like the most sensible and definitely the recommended approach.
Absolutely. We really hope this deep dive has given everyone listening a much clearer picture of, well, the complexities of snoring and also the surprisingly large number of ways it can potentially be tackled.
Yeah.
We'd encourage you to maybe reflect on what we've discussed. Think about which factors or solutions might be most relevant to your own situation, or perhaps to someone you know who snores.
And on that note, maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. Considering how deeply interconnected everything is, our sleep, our breathing, our overall health, our relationships, taking steps to actually address snoring, to understand and manage it, could potentially have these far-reaching positive effects on your life, on your health, your mood, your relationships, ways you might not have even fully considered before.
It's a really good point. It might be well worth digging a bit deeper, finding out the cause, and maybe even chatting with a doctor or a sleep specialist to figure out the best path forward for you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.